Hello everyone, how's it going? I hope that you're all doing well. It's fantastic to see everyone that's coming on online right now. We're just quickly switching on our cameras so we can actually start the webinar. I just want to say firstly, thank you to everyone that's tuning in. We know with COVID and about 3 or so weeks to your exams, it must be a very hectic period, but we're so glad that everyone's able to put away at least an hour in your lunchtime to actually listen into this. So a warm welcome. Thank you all for joining. So I'll start now and just give a quick intro to what this is and where we're coming from. So SEW, I think a lot of you have heard, this webinar is part of the Student Entrepreneurship Week. The Student Entrepreneurship Week is running for the whole of this week, and what it is exactly is we're trying to create awareness about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurism on the SU campus. The week is annually held, and the LaunchLab hosts it. Martha, myself, I want to introduce myself. I am hosting our engineering webinar today. I am also a student at Stellenbosch University. I'm an engineering student. It's my second year of master's in industrial engineering. So I can relate. I'm also really excited to hear what our exciting panel has for us today. A few orientation things. Can you please let us know if you can hear us, if you're able to see us, is everything running? You can just post that in the chat. And as the webinar runs on, as we have our conversations, we're gonna have, we have a Q&A sort of section. I think there's a chat and there's a Q&A. If you've got any questions that you want to ask the panel as we go on, please do post them in the Q&A. I think we've also enabled an up voting functionality, so you're able to vote up any questions that, if you have a similar question to someone that they've posted, you're able to up vote it, and we'll be able to see it and answer the question with urgency compared to others. So yeah, so without further ado, I think we're going to get into it. I want to introduce you guys to this amazing panel of people, but I also think they can speak better for themselves about who they are, what they're doing, why they're relevant for this panel specifically. So I'll start with Brandon. If you want to unmute yourself and then just tell us who you are and what you do and everything. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Martha. So I've been at the LaunchLab for 5.5 years since we moved into this building just across the street from the engineering faculty. Now it's behind a massive construction zone and there's a tractor outside my window. So if we lose audio, that's why. There's people doing some engineering works outside. I'm the VP of Innovation, and that really just means I'm mostly responsible for everything that has to do with the companies and the entrepreneurs that we work with. So that's been an absolute privilege over the last 5.5 years to work with entrepreneurs from the university, from spinouts and students and abroad, including the two panelists that are here with us today, and Martha, even yourself from industrial engineering meets agri. And maybe just one thing I'll brag on the LaunchLab, because this is a friendly audience with Stellenbosch University students and alumni and faculty. So the LaunchLab since 2017 has been named the #1 university incubator on the continent. And we're trying to get into the top rankings globally, but for now, we'll just be okay with being the top in Africa for the last 4 years. And with that, we've worked with dozens of different businesses. The companies in the LaunchLab have raised 211 million Rand of risk capital, never mind the hundreds of millions of Rands of revenue that have come into the companies, which is much more exciting. So yeah, it's a exciting space and a privilege to be able to work with the absolute quality entrepreneurs that come from this university.
That's very exciting. Yeah, we're excited to hear more, Brandon. And Este, if you want to tell us about yourself. Este, you're muted, so if you want to unmute yourself real quick. Thank you.
Sorry, rookie error. Is this fine?
Yes, that's perfect.
Okay. No, Martha, sorry, just mentioned you guys are writing exams soon, so I feel like I just want to say good luck because I know how that feels. And then I wanted to say I'm Este. I studied electronic engineering, and then I did my master's in biomedical engineering, and I was part of a research group that was led by Prof. Beryl, biosensor research group. And we had subdivisions of research projects that focused on the development of biosensors that can detect inflammatory factors and molecules in the blood. And this links to chronic inflammation, which then in turn links to inflammatory diseases such as cancer and Alzheimer's and cardiovascular diseases. So this is a really very relevant topic at the moment because this is kind of the pandemic of our time, if I dare say so, during COVID. Lifestyle diseases and inflammatory diseases is really what's killing most of the people, especially in first world countries, and it's a problem in undeveloped countries as well. So because this is such a relevant topic, we got some funding to start a biosensor company to develop these kind of biosensors and commercialize them and make them part of a system that would help with early disease detection and with preventative medicine. So that is what we're trying to do. And we are really in an R&D phase, and we are trying to move towards commercialization.
Awesome. Thanks, Este. It's lovely to meet you. GJ, because I cannot pronounce African pronunciation of this, if you want to give us a quick intro of yourself as well. Yeah.
We tried to get Martha to say just before the call, but without any luck. No, don't call me Gert-Jan or GJ or GJ. So I'm originally an electronic engineer, used to be an academic. Then I got rehabilitated and went into business, joined a startup business that was a spin-out business from the university where I spent almost the last 6 years. And then unfortunately, I backslid back into academia again recently. At the moment, I'm associate professor in electronic engineering and industrial engineering. And I head up the research chair in the Internet of Things, which is a new position that was founded to really stimulate the innovation between various disciplines, places where new technology and emerging machine learning have impact on things like biomedicine. So I happen to do a bit of work with Este and her group on the IoT aspect of their biomedical research. And we doing some agri-tech kind of work at the moment as well. But my real deep interest is in innovation and in turning ideas into business. And I love being in this liminal, in this in-between space between academia and startups and business, and trying to figure out how to make things connect. And also walked a long path with Brandon and his colleagues at the LaunchLab. My spin-out business, Christos, was housed in the LaunchLab, and that's really where we grew up and figured out how to run a startup that's built on deep tech.
It's very exciting. It's very exciting. There's a lot of engineering, academic things being spoken right now. I think there's a lot of introductions that have to do with engineering academics. So actually, I just want to start there. I think, Gigi, I'll just throw it at you and the ball can roll with everyone. There's a lot of academic sort of things. I think we're used to the academic space of we just do our 4 years, 5 for some, of engineering. And at the end of it, we try to get out there and get our qualification as an engineer, candidate engineer, get registered and practice. So I just want to hear what firstly is entrepreneurship for you guys in the engineering context, and why is this something that should be lucrative for students? Why is this something we should be interested in? Yeah.
Well, I think the very nice thing about engineering, especially at Stellenbosch, is it's one of those qualifications that has a certain amount of business skills and problem solving built into the course. So we have this great relationship with industry through EXA and EXA's requirements that really keeps us grounded and prevents us from moving in too theoretical or academic qualification. And the fact of the matter is, if you finish your 4-year BEng qualification, you're in a really good position to start your own small business. It doesn't need to be a fancy startup taking some other world-breaking innovation to the market. Something I've seen recently, especially with the software engineers, is a trend of forming your own business, doing various gigs with other larger clients, rather than sending out CVs and going job hunting for a single position. And I think that's something we're going to see more of in the near future. And then, of course, engineering research is quite often on the cusp of industry application as well. And I think that's why we see many of our research activities spin over into commercial application, because we, as engineers, we really work in that what Stokes calls the postures quadrant of doing research and development that's very close to how it's going to be used, and that's where good businesses come from. And now you muted, Martha.
No, sure. Este, do you have something to say to that? I mean, you're an engineer that's now in a startup. Just why do that rather than actually go into having to work for a big company or something of the sort? How's it been?
Well,
how's your
I
experience?
think I have something in common with most engineers, and that's we like to build things, we like to create things. And that's where the startup company allows you to do it. It gives you the opportunity to build something from scratch and to be significantly involved in so many different aspects of the design and the business. So I feel for me specifically, it's obviously going to be different for everyone, but I really like that challenge. I like waking up every day and doing something new and trying to figure out what I don't know and asking the right questions and challenging the people around me, but also learning from them. So I think it is compatible with the engineering mentality of wanting to create something for yourself and build something and learn something. So I think that's why I wanted to do it.
Sure, that's very, very cool. So just to let everyone know, if you've got any questions, please put them in the question and answer little chat thingy. And then also just to let you guys know that this is being recorded. So at the end of the day, we can make this recording available for whoever missed, or if you want to send it on to a friend, or if you want to revisit it sometime. Okay, awesome. So Este and GJ, you guys actually, you've worked closely with the university and stuff. I think something that we don't often hear is how the university is supportive of entrepreneurship, because we're trying to steer it on campus right now, but most people don't know where to start, how they can start. Is the university supportive of it? Do they take part of my company and then I'm just left with shambles? So what can happen there? If you could tell us, how is the university supportive? Is it supportive? What has been your experience with that? Yeah.
So I think that's actually a quite complex question and a quite complex answer. Because depending on what type of business you're looking at, if it's something that's built on research that happened at the university, a company that emerges from that is usually a university spin out. So typically the university would then have some shareholding in the company. The inventors might become part of the management or the staff as engineers inside the company. But it is an incredible way of getting a very good launch pad for what you're building, because you start a business with really, really good backing, and usually on intellectual property that's world class, because the kind of research that you get at Stellenbosch is world class. The other type of business that you I think don't hear about as often are the businesses that start among students inside the university, making use of the fact that they're in this very heavily networked environment. So I know of, well, it'd be difficult to count, but I know of a great many good, prominent South African businesses that started out as a couple of students together in Res, or I know of at least one big company in Technopark that started out as a bunch of master students that just didn't graduate, and they just enrolled again and again and again, and they sat in the E&E 4th floor lab, and they built their company there. And it was just nobody really minded. They didn't use or abuse university resources, but they were in an environment where it was just a little bit easier getting things started. And I think those are the majority of the unspoken successes that come out of the university. And those aren't companies where the university has any claim on the intellectual property or shareholding in the company. It's just this fertile ground where students come up with great ideas and start businesses. And I've seen many of those over the years. And I think to answer Maricel's question about that, I think we should go to more effort of really just lifting up what's happening in our among our alumni and what businesses they started, because I don't think we speak about that often enough or highlight that enough.
Can I add to that, Martha?
Yeah, please.
So specifically, like support for, if I think undergrad students, because I'm imagining that's the bulk of people talking here, but there's also quite a bit for postgrad, masters and docs and postdocs. And it might be a slightly counter to what GJ was just saying, but the best age to start a company is 40, statistically, around different areas. And that's around about, I think you were a little bit younger than that when CubeSpace came through, GJ.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean you only start thinking about entrepreneurship at 40. There's entrepreneurial learning that you must go through from 22 or 25, whenever you finish studying, until you're ready. And it doesn't mean 40 is the magic number. But I think with the number of fascinating companies at the LaunchLab, Este was describing BioCODE, and what Kustos was doing that Gert-Jan was leading. And there's dozens more companies that are that interesting. CubeSpace that I'm wearing today is a specialist in control systems for CubeSats. The satellites the size of a loaf of bread, they're specialists in those control systems. So if you just look around locally at the fascinating companies that we get to work with at the LaunchLab, and talking about Technopark, there's Alpha Wave and things there. Doing an internship as a student, or not looking at the Oricons or I think they're called Zutari now, and looking at those large corporates for work, but rather looking at local entrepreneurial ventures where the founder is still alive and involved every day. You get the real, I don't know, the groundwork. You're at the grassroots of the entrepreneurial vision, the venture building vision, and you can really catch that. It's easier to think entrepreneurially when you're around entrepreneurs. I'm not a natural entrepreneur, but from my first job, I was working for entrepreneurs. And now I've kind of found myself dissatisfied with not being in that creation, venture creation, or some kind of entrepreneurial thing. So yeah, that's a long-winded answer to say, find companies. We have internship opportunities within the LaunchLab to get stuck into some of these fascinating companies. And there's also a few different programs that are on our website called Countdown that helps you figure out, is this idea not just feasible, but viable? Not just can you execute the idea, but could it potentially actually make money and at least pay for itself? As well as Liftoff that gives you some of the basic business skills beyond just can you build the product, because there's marketing and operations and finance that also needs to go into the business. It's not just about the product. So at the LaunchLab, we offer things like that as support for students at Stellenbosch University.
Brandon, maybe to pick up on what you said over there, I fully agree. Statistically, the highest chance you have of building a successful business is once you've grown your career a little bit. Late 30s or around there is statistically one of the sweet spots. However, and Este, maybe you can comment on that, the lowest risk part of your life to start a business is in your early 20s, because you have fewer financial obligations. It's at a point where you're very close to your university route, so you have this network of resources that you can draw upon. And that's quite often where we see these young, very dynamic teams trying out new things, perhaps failing at them. But one thing that Silicon Valley taught us is that failure is a good thing, because you're creating compost for the next venture, and you're creating experience that's going to flow into your future career. So it's a very good stage of your life to go and try wild things while the the risk of failure, the personal risk of failure, is lower.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think one of the biggest advantages of getting into this early is to improve your relationship with failure, because that's something you're going to experience many times and you're going to make many mistakes, and you have to learn how to see it as a means to an end rather than just a reason to give up. And as Gert-Jan said, I mean, this is the lowest risk time of your life. So use it to make mistakes, but also move forward in a smart way. So try to make efficient mistakes. And that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I'm still new at this, but I think that's one of the most valuable things that I'm getting out of this, is learning how to make mistakes and challenge myself every day to challenge my direction and ask the right questions and figure out what I don't know. So yeah, I think great. Just improve your relationship with failure, but aim to succeed.
And to add to that, I think it's easier a little bit later in your career to move from small business or startup into a corporate environment than it is going the other way around. Because your entrepreneurial experience will certainly look good on a CV if you decide to go the corporate route. But I think it's more difficult becoming specialized in a certain area in the corporate engineering environment and then uprooting and doing a startup, although we do see that from time to time. And you quite often see later career engineers who understand a certain core component of their employer's business very well, break off and start a competitor in that space and do something more efficient.
Sure. No, if I can throw any 2 cents in there, I want to say I completely agree with just you have to try, you have to put yourself out there, and you have to see what happens. In my own experience, a couple of friends of ours, we tried to start a business from a class project. One of our final year projects had sort of a competition, and we entered through that, and we had this idea, but it didn't lift off at the time because of various reasons. But just putting ourselves out there and considering it seriously, having to actually do the checks. What can make this work? Who's my market? Who's asking all those vital questions? What's my business model? Thinking in that way really helped me actually to start to consider the business world in a different way than I had thought before. And if I hadn't actually tried, it would be very interesting. I would know nothing about where do I even begin. So I really think there is value in all that you're saying. But which brings me to the next thing, or the next question I want to ask. When I was working with a LaunchLab. I was actually working with Brandon, and he was mentoring me. And I think a lot of us don't know what that means for us. We don't know what does LaunchLab actually mean for students trying to be entrepreneurs, for students trying to shape entrepreneurial thinking, for students with various ideas that they want to push through. And I mean, Este and GJ, I'll also give you the opportunity if you want to tell us about your experience working with LaunchLab or building a startup. But to throw firstly at Brandon, what is LaunchLab and what does that mean for students in terms of studying anything entrepreneurship? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the general program offerings I just covered, but maybe to go at it at a different angle. And sorry if I pick on engineers a little bit. I'm an MBA, and usually when you pick on engineers, you can pick on MBAs in the same way. So touche. But it's the general MBA, or not general MBA, the general engineering thought pattern that I think gets corrected over time is if I build it, they will buy it. So that baseball quote, if you build it, they will come. The engineers apply that. If I build it, they will buy it. The features, it's amazing. It sells itself. It does not sell itself. Never. And I think what the LaunchLab helps you do is understand the difference between feasibility and viability. Feasibility, can I attach the Bitcoin blockchain to a digital media file and then get bounty hunters to find that and mine the Bitcoin out of that thing? Sorry, GJ, if I'm being too direct with an example. Feasibly, yes, it's technically possible. And oftentimes you can get a patent for feasibility. And Stellenbosch University is the most prolific innovator if you look at patents on the African continent. More than CSIR, more than any other university point. But a patent means it's feasible. It doesn't mean it's viable. And a viability means it can feed itself. It can wash its own face. It can stand alone without more money being pumped into it, that it's not generating itself. So the viability of the business is different. And you have to actually understand the human element, the emotional element, and marketing comes into that, sales in a way comes into that, business development, where you have to actually talk to humans. And I think the LaunchLab, maybe specifically on that, helps you figure out how to talk to humans. Even if you're a BCom marketing major, there's still the academic side of it versus the practical out in the world side of it. And you have to understand how it actually works in the real world. And the LaunchLab, through its social capital and its vast network of customers looking for stuff and investors looking for things, you find out very quickly if it's actually viable, or if it's just a nice idea that could be really cool, but people aren't going to give you money for that.
Yeah, and I think I just want to add there, especially from my side, because I've just stepped into a biosensor company and I'm coming from a research background. It's so important to early make that mind shift from a research-based mindset to a entrepreneurial business mindset, because like you said, there's a difference between there's really a difference between doing a project or developing something for a research project and then actually taking that thing and commercializing it and making sure that it is feasible and viable. And that's a big mind shift. And I know, like most of us are coming from a research background, especially if you're doing a master's. So I feel like the LaunchLab really gives you the opportunity to start changing your mindset from a research mindset to a business mindset.
And I think key to that is that old thing that you often hear people say, but I don't think we pause enough about what it means, namely fail fast. That you need to figure out as soon as possible why your business idea is not going to work, or why this beautiful piece of technology that you're building is completely unsellable. And we as engineers really like building stuff, and we love the stuff we build, and we tend to assume that we're going to be the user and everyone else is going to love it as well. And then the product hits the market and sales don't happen, and the business fails far too long down the road. If you're interested in being entrepreneurial and building a business, try to figure out ways to challenge your assumptions of why this is viable as soon as possible. And quite often you can do that without building something or writing a line of code. You can do that by going and speaking with people and figuring out whether they actually need what you think would be really, really cool. So don't just be inventors, be entrepreneurs who challenge the business viability of an idea.
Yeah, I think that's something I've really learned in the last years is go and find people who can give you an idea of what you don't know yet, because you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble if you can learn from other people's mistakes. You're going to learn from your own as well. But yeah, it's just fail fast and move forward fast. But you're going to do that by learning from other people's mistakes as well.
And one way you can do that is by pitching your business idea to investors or to customers who really hate what you're doing. And ask the hard questions, and walking away bloody-nosed from that conversation and trying to figure out how you can adapt what you're doing, how you can learn from that conversation to move towards a better product.
No, that's very, very good. Which now I think brings me to my next one. I just want to ask all of you, especially Brandon, you've worked with quite a bit of startups. You've worked with quite a few of them in LaunchLab, and I think GJ and Este are also part of that. But if you could give us examples, what have been some of the startups you've worked with? You can name them as well for GJ and Este. And what are those that are successful? Why, or in your opinion, why are they successful from an engineering perspective? And those that are not, why do you think not? I know you've touched on some of the answers, but it would be good to actually round it up for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, some with all that I said about feasibility versus viability, some things the market is in a position where it actually does sell itself. Like CubeSpace, the shirt I'm wearing, in its first year of being an actual company spinning out of the university, it paid a pretty sizable dividend to all of its shareholders, including the university. And that was 1 year of existence. And when you specialize in something that niche, that's that narrow of a supply base, I guess you can say, and they also had 30 years of technical expertise in the field that their IP and the control systems were built on top of. So it's 1 year operating as a company with more than 3 decades of research that went into that, understanding what's feasible and what's viable. So as the business sitting as the control system, yeah, so it doesn't necessarily go exactly like that, where you have to check the viability and feasibility. But I think the 30 years helped them understand that it was viable, and then they spun the company out. And also the person leading that business was an engineer, a master's in mechatronic engineering, that as they were in the university still operating and trading before they spun out, he realized that being an engineer or a master and specialist in mechatronic engineering did not make him a good leader or a good entrepreneur directly. So as he was spinning out, he understood, I actually have to figure out myself as a leader because I have employees, and employees are not students doing research projects and then they're gone in 6 months. Employees are with you for several years if you do it right. And hopefully if the business is growing and you're able to keep them involved and bought into the mission, he had to figure out himself how to actually lead fickle, emotional humans, because machines are predictable. There's numbers and you know what the formula comes out with at the end and you can calculate how that works. You cannot calculate how to interact with a human. And what motivates them today will not be the same next Tuesday. So how do you figure that out? So the CubeSpace engineering story has been very fascinating to watch as the individuals in the team in their 20s, fresh out of university, are growing into their own as entrepreneurs. So the CubeSpace is one really cool engineering company that's come out. And I think I'd take another approach at not an engineering company, but PIXA. It's financial services for low-income workers, starting with farm workers. And in particular, that company, the CEO's name is Paul Kim. That's his third venture. It wasn't his first thing. So the first one was an incredible failure. The second one was a mediocre failure, and which is actually still going and trading and operating. But the third one was actually the one that made it. And he took all of that compost from his learnings in the first two and then really applied it into the third one. And they're really doing well. I don't know if I answered the question directly, but I think I eventually got around to what you were looking for there.
I think so. I think you've answered the question. So go over it, try, and a few other things. Este or GJ, do you have any comments or answers to that as well?
I don't think I have anything to add. I haven't had much to do with the other LaunchLab businesses, but yeah, I feel Brandon's input is valuable.
Okay, great.
And also, I think I miss not having had the LaunchLab back when we started out trying out first things. The LaunchLab back when we did the Media Lab at Stellenbosch University, where we started stimulating entrepreneurship. We had many student startups coming out of that environment that had really no place to go and didn't have that nurturing environment. And over the past decade, I could see the value that the LaunchLab has brought to helping students who want to try something out, want to start a business, really find their feet and figure out how to do that. And like Brandon said, overcoming our engineering instincts to build and developing instincts to sell.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a great advantage of having a centralized place where you have all these people with ideas and there is kind of cross-pollination all the time. So that's something I really appreciate of being in the LaunchLab.
I'm going to take a question from the Q&A, and this has to do with capital, because I think that's also something we don't often hear about or speak about. But someone actually asked and said, engineering startups by nature seem to require high initial capital investment. So how can a student with an idea overcome this, particularly a new graduate? I think, yeah, something we often don't know, sort of the initial cost of what it's going to cost until you get there and you realize its amount. And for some people, it's a deterrent to actually even want to start, because they know it's going to require quite a bit of capital and they don't have it right now, which is why we go into the traditional career thing, so I can gather some capital investment. So what has been you guys' experience? What advice do you have, or what input do you have there? Yeah.
Yes, I think that's a very relevant question. And it depends on the engineering area, the engineering discipline as well. If you're doing software engineering, the cost of starting a software business has virtually gone down to zero. It's something you can literally do in your res room, and I've seen a couple of businesses start that way. But the same isn't true for a manufacturing innovation or for a mechanical innovation, and there you need capital. I've seen a couple of companies very successfully build up their own capital by starting with software innovation and building up on previous successes until they can self-fund larger, more expensive projects. So many of the larger groups of companies you see in the Stellenbosch area, like in Techno Park, has done that successfully. They built on the success of previous products, built up their own capital, and now apply that to innovation. But that's difficult to do if you're a student and you want to start out with a new idea. Again, speak to the LaunchLab, speak to Innovus, because they're one of the best places to find the funding opportunities. And when we talk about capital and funding, the high visibility form of funding is always venture capital, because we've all watched the Silicon Valley series and we know what VCs are like. But Brandon and his team can also help you with the quieter forms of capital, the types of angel investors that are looking for investments, companies in the area, those companies I spoke about earlier that are looking for the good new ideas because they want to invest in the next big thing or the next big product. But it's probably the best area to get in touch with people who've been through the process first and can help connect the dots with capital, because finding capital has a lot to do with where in the network you connected and who you're speaking to.
Yeah, Martha, I think if I refer to a conversation you and I had last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago, the LaunchLab has no money, but we have a lot of social capital. And particularly at this university, we sit in the 20th highest concentration of dollar millionaires in the world. So there's a lot of people around that don't advertise, we have all this money, but there was one of the companies some years ago got matched up with a mentor. And then the mentor wasn't really, like, they were really interested in the business that this startup was doing, but his background was very different to what they were doing. And after a few months, the mentor said to the LaunchLab team, like, hey, do they need some money? Do you think I could invest? And like, yes, of course they'd like to invest. Do you think they'd want my money because I'm from somewhere else? And that mentor ended up being like a very key investor to that startup company. So there's lots of different ways to go about it, but the social capital that I think sits in the LaunchLab is the most valuable thing that we have. And then giving access, like, it's not Brandon from a cold email, connect me to so-and-so, and it doesn't work like that because that's our social capital that we have to spend. So we have to make sure if we make a referral, it's worthwhile for everyone involved. But being in the LaunchLab, you get to bump shoulders with a lot of those interesting people. So you have to put yourself in those circles. So whatever events that we put on and talks and competitions that come out, make sure you capitalize on those. And Gert-Jan, is one of your old co-founders things he would also say too. Fred would also say, pitch in competitions. It gets your name out there. People do press releases on you if you're in the finals and you pitch and whatever. And there's a little bit of money that comes from that. Like you might look at 20 or 30 or 50, maximum 100,000. But cash is cash. And to the point you made earlier, GJ, when you're 24, your overheads are quite low in life. So 20,000 Rand is actually quite a bit of money. And there's one, the Department of Higher Education hosts the EDHE program every year, and the LaunchLab runs an idea smash that's sponsored by Prof. Kluta, who is doing the webinar on Friday. And so that's also a way. There's seed money that comes from the university to go into those winners on campus, as well as a national competition that gets you national exposure. And that's up to 150,000 Rand, if I remember right, the total prize that you can get from that. So pitching in competitions, it's an easy way to get PR and also money for your business.
It's very cool. I just want to also let everyone know that if you actually want to hear about more of these things, or what the LaunchLab is, in terms of how can you get into the LaunchLab, and how what activities we have running, what events we have running, what competitions we have running, we also going to post our social media and all our accounts in the chat, so you have access. Follow us there. Follow us in terms of whatever we're going to post on there. You'll be able to see about the competitions. You'll be able to see if we're posting anything, and you can get involved. The networking events, all of that is posted on our social media. So if you follow us there, you'll be able to have contact or access to all of that. I also put through another question from the audience. I think one of the students is asking about just the feasibility or viability of starting a business in South Africa. What their question is, they understand that South Africa is one of the most difficult countries to start a successful business. And does the LaunchLab feel like this is the case? And just any general comments on that?
I'll jump in since no one's chomping at the bit. I actually disagree with your understanding there, Reinhard. I think starting a business is difficult, point, and it doesn't really matter what country you're in. That's why so few people are entrepreneurs. And there's a few key characteristics of where we are that make it different from other places, but I don't think it's more or less difficult. I think it's just what it is. And like if you look at the US ecosystem, that's probably the most publicly known in the media, because they've got the TV show and all those things. And it seems like there's just money falling out of trees for people that are starting ideas, but it's very noisy. And to make it big now in the US is almost impossible, especially coming up with something new. There's nothing new that's really done. So what makes America difficult is how noisy it is, even though it's a massive market. I think one key thing for us is that we don't have the noise. So that's one thing that's actually easier in South Africa to create things. The pockets of influence and capital are actually more focused and narrowed, and you have access to those, where in the States, there's Silicon Valley, there's Boston, there's Austin, there's a few small nodes, but 350 million people are all trying to access that, where we have very few people trying to access that. So it's a focused community, and it is smaller, but they're a lot easier to access. So that's what makes it a bit easier in South Africa to actually get it done. There's other laws like exchange controls and the Reserve Bank with where does IP sit and where does it not sit. But those are, I think for my opinion, that's what makes you an entrepreneur. If you figure out how to navigate all of those things legally and profitably. So if you can get around the IP laws and the Reserve Bank exchange control things legally, then you've been creative in the entrepreneurial journey. That's why, GJ, to also a reference to what you said before, an inventor is not an entrepreneur. That's what makes the inventor an entrepreneur, when you can navigate the regulatory and financial environment to make a business out of what you're doing.
I want
Brandon,
to.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Este. No.
No, I actually just want to ask a question from my side, because I've often heard the argument that South Africa actually has a lot of opportunities because we have a unique set of problems that has to be solved. And like you said, the noise isn't as much. So I was actually wondering what both Gia and Brandon thinks of the fact that there might be more opportunities in South Africa.
I think that question ties in very well to what I was just about to say, that if you, I want to slightly in a nuanced way differ from Brandon and say that it can be very, very difficult starting business in South Africa. Because look, it's easy starting a company. It costs 175 rands to register BDY Limited and you've got your company. But starting a business, something that's generating money, for that you're going to need access to human capital, you need clever people, you're going to need access to market. And I think that's what Este is saying there, that if you pick your market well and you really play into the African market, you're giving yourself a bit of a leg up. You need access to financial capital typically, and that can be difficult in the local environment depending on what you're building. My personal experience is that if you're building a really deep tech business that's hard to understand for the CA on the investment committee of the VC, then it's going to be more difficult raising capital. And then you need access to, quite often, to intellectual capital as well, clever ideas and clever environments. Now, if I were to score those, I'd say if you, a student, a graduate or a postgraduate here in Stellenbosch, you've got great intellectual capital at your disposal because you're dealing with really, really clever people in a very inventive environment. You've got amazing human capital. Some of the best entrepreneurs and engineers in the world come here from where we are and the Western Cape in general. So a very, very good concentration of people. But I think depending on the business that you have in mind, access to market and access to capital might be the places where you're going to find it more difficult. And that's why I want to agree with Este that if you pick your battles wisely, at Custos, we had this concept of using blockchain technology. Well, businesses up and running. Our technology was made to really serve anti-piracy, media protection for large media producers. And that was easy to build and test in South Africa because we had the intellectual capital and the human capital, but the market was elsewhere. And that jump to the States and to Europe turned out to be a quite difficult thing to get right. Whereas if you have a business that addresses a very local problem, that might be easier to achieve.
If I can jump on that, I think someone posted a question here about what societal issues or problems in South Africa you think can be solved while trying to make a profit about it. I think that for me ties in terms of having to strategically position yourself, something that you want to answer or something that you want to address, and those different pockets that actually would be lucrative to tap into. So I think also this would help the different people that think, okay, I want to start a business, but I actually don't have any ideas. Where can I station myself that I make an impact, that I'm able to serve the community around me, but also lucratively make a profit and sustain myself income-wise. So what, in you guys' opinion and in you guys' experience, where's the need, and where would you advise people to sort of low-hanging fruit? Where do we start? Where do we look? Yeah.
I want to jump in and then say that I feel, especially in terms of healthcare, and that's my opinion now because that's the direction I'm taking. But obviously, there's a lot of different sectors where it applies. But for like a startup company like BioCODE, where we are trying to develop biosensors, it's extremely important that we try to develop technology that is feasible in rural areas and is feasible with for use in mobile clinics and stuff like that. So just the whole way you are thinking about your design has to be inclusive for this country. And that makes it kind of a special niche experience. And I think that applies to different sectors as well. I don't know what Gert and Brandon has to say about it.
No, absolutely. And the other one I'd add to that is agricultural technology. So if my two pet areas of interest at the moment are biotech, because I think we've got very unique healthcare problems to solve in the African context, and technology is an enabler to make things possible that would be difficult otherwise, or that is difficult at the moment. And the other one is food security, and you applying emerging technology, machine learning, satellite imagery, robotics, drones, all of that, sensor networks into improving the scale at which we can produce food, and lowering the barrier of entry for emerging farmers to do high precision farming. I think there's a legion of good opportunities in those two fields.
I'll take a slightly lower tech angle, agreeing with both of what you're saying. And I think general digital and apps and fintech, there's still a lot of opportunity, but it's kind of been done by a lot of different people and companies, and I think it's starting to plateau. General apps, like there's an app for about everything. So if you just want to build an app, find something hard to solve that the app is actually servicing. But I think in the inclusive tech, if I can bring that to the table, or I don't know if inclusive tech or inclusive innovation, in a country where there's 11 official languages and 15 however many other languages, I think it's like 15 actual languages. Martha, I'm not sure how many languages are in Uganda, but it's a lot. I think one of our employees, one of our team members at the LaunchLab used to be, well, he is still Nigerian. He used to be on the team, but there's hundreds of languages up in his area of the continent. And bringing together disparate people groups that don't sound like each other, that don't think like each other, that don't look like each other, I think is a really interesting thing to look at solving for. And there's a lot of different, and that's just the person, the ethnic demographic, if you want to talk about that, never mind the socioeconomic demographic that comes with that. And maybe one example, I'm on the board of another startup called Fix Forward that does training for tradespeople in construction and plumbing and electricians and things, because they're great at their actual craft, but the administration around the business, they're just getting started with how that works. So we do training to get them able to send invoices on time and quality certificates and all of those things so that they can do bigger jobs for larger corporates and everything. Creating a platform where any individual living in Somerset West can find someone that just does good at that job, that's an excellent plumber, but then not just putting on your neighborhood WhatsApp group or Facebook community, hey, who has a good plumber? And there's always going to be a very narrow social network that will probably end up recommending someone that looks like the person requesting. Where if you can bring in competition to those types of things where anyone can quote on that job and then the best quote actually wins. So bringing together some kind of social networking element to getting work done that brings people, if I need plumbing done at my house, bring me someone that's actually good at the job and not just someone that looks like me that my neighbor used last week. And there's a lot, that is one thing. Mzansi Go is another LaunchLab company that's been great at that. Voller, the Volunteer Dollar, another inclusive technology company that we're working with. So I think anything that's bridging the gaps between the disparate people groups in our society, just thinking locally in South Africa, I think there's a lot of service to be done. There's a lot of needs to be met. Whether you retire and make $1 billion company, I don't know if that's possible, but you can make a good living, and you can feed people, and you can create jobs with that. And maybe getting off of the unicorn idea would also be a helpful thing to do. And like, what are the needs that we can meet? And this social connecting and inclusive technology, I think, is a great way to solve a lot of problems, to meet a lot of needs, and create a lot of jobs, and also make good money.
Yeah, and now that you're speaking about connecting and stuff, I was actually thinking about adding something to the healthcare topic. The public sector healthcare especially is extremely fragmented in terms of just the systems that they use, the software that they use, the records that they keep. And I think that's something, I think there's amazing opportunities in that regard to try and solve those problems, because there's a lot to be solved. And I mean, most of the people in South Africa are on the public or use the public healthcare services. So I really think that's also a gold mine for new ideas and opportunities.
And something I really like is when a startup uses absolutely commodity technology to solve a hard problem and to build a business. And my favorite LaunchLab company in that regard remains Fresh, who simply uses a web form and WhatsApp to disintermediate grocers. So it's a business that connects farmers directly to myself, to consumers who want fresh milk and veggies and things in the morning, and they deliver straight from farm to the house first thing in the morning over your car gate, so you don't have to wake up and open up for them. Saves us a ton of money driving around between shops, and it gives better prices, better income for the farmers, and Fresh can take a bit of profit that otherwise would have gone to the grocer, the big grocery chain in the middle. And it's a beautiful example, I think, of a low-tech business that solves a problem, a local problem, in an innovative way. And touching on what Este said about healthcare, I remember it must have been about 12 years ago, 10 years ago, the then Premier of the Western Cape visited the Media Lab, and she spoke about technology and how technology can improve government services. And I used an example where she said, if somebody would just develop a simple way where people don't have to queue at clinics, where you can register somewhere via USSD or SMS, and you get a message to tell you at what time to arrive. And you have a bit of cleverness in the back to manage queues. And it sounds like such a sort of low barrier to entry to get something like that. But in 12 years, that hasn't happened. And I think there are many such cases where we as engineers think too big. We want to build big, clever technological stuff, but there are opportunities to solve very real problems just using commodity tech.
Yeah, that's very, very good. Oh, those are very cool insights for all of us, I feel. I see we're running out of time, so 3 minutes, but I see there's still quite a few questions to go. So a lot of them have to do with the how to do something and how to start, how to communicate, how to all of that, and also just in terms of what the LaunchLab actually offers. So I just want to encourage all the students and also let you know, starting next week, we're going to be doing office hours at the PPS Lounge. So for all the students over lunchtime, if you still have questions directly related to how to pitch your idea, how to formulate ideas, how to present yourself for investment, what to go for in terms of capital and all of that, and also just generally in regards to LaunchLab, I want to encourage you to drop in at us at the PPS Lounge. If you want to know more about what the office hours are going to be and where, and if you also want to book slots and that sort of thing, drop me an email at martha@launchlab.co.za. I put it in the comment in the chats there. And also, if you just generally want to know about LaunchLab and what it can do for you, also send us an email at info@launchlab.co.za. So unfortunate that we couldn't get to all the questions, but at least you have those email addresses to actually answer the rest of it. This was really, really cool, guys. I've enjoyed just hearing what's the way forward and what we can do. So I just want to firstly thank the panelists for taking time to have a conversation with us. I think we've all learned something very, very, very valuable. And I just want to also let the students know that this is a it's a 3-part webinar. So this first one is for engineering, but there'll be another one on Friday that's for all the SU students. So if you want to sign up for that, we'll put a link, or we'll try to put the link in there. In the chat. If we don't, it's still circulating in all the social media outlets, so you're able to sign up for that and then join in for another conversation where we explore all of these topics widely for all students. Okay, awesome. Thank you guys for your time. I hope that this was really insightful. Shoot us an email if you've got more questions, and yeah, we'll take it from there. Awesome.
Thank you, Martha, for your great leadership in this conversation.
This was awesome. I'm glad. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, GJ and Este.
Thanks,
Cheers.
GJ.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.